Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of the Board of Directors of the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency for 2017. I'd like to welcome everybody back, specifically our new directors. So we have Sue Frost from Sacramento County Board of Supervisors and Mr. Matt Conant from Sutter County. So welcome to you both. I'm sure you'll find SAFCA to be as fun as I do, at least I hope you do. So, Madam Clerk, can we have announcements and roll call?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting of SAFCA is being broadcast live and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14 and will be re-aired on, the agenda does say January 21st at 12 o'clock. I'd like to correct that. They had a meeting run late, so it will now be re-aired at 1 p.m. And streaming video is available on SAFCA's website within 48 hours after the meeting. Members of the audience that wish to address the board should fill out a blue speaker form located here on the lectern and bring it up to me. When addressing the board, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. Roll call. Matt Conant. Here. Nick Avdis. Here. Tom Barandis. Here. Brian Holloway. Here. Cyril Shaw. Here. Angelique Ashby. Here. Jeff Harris.
Here.
Rick Jennings. Here. Sue Frost. Here. Don Natoli. Susan Peters. Patrick Kennedy. Here. Phil Cerna. Here. We do have a quorum.
Okay, very good. Mr. Conant, would you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our first item of business will be election of officers. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I have to admit I'm not exactly sure of the order of business here, so I'd like to ask Mr. Dodds about how SAFCA does the election of officers. Do we start with chair, vice chair, etc.?
You would usually start with the chair and then do the vice chair.
Very good.
And everybody, I believe, received a copy of the policy, your board policy, as far as membership was, or as far as term of office was concerned.
Yeah, very good. I think all the directors are probably aware. It was certainly in the packet. So we'll start, I guess, then by taking nominations for chair for this year for SAFCA.
I would move Patrick Kennedy.
Second.
And I'll third.
I'm sorry, was the second Mr. Cerna? Thank you.
There you go. Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of making Mr. Kennedy chair for 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Done. So, as is customary at this point, I turn the gavel over to the new chair, and he'll continue the meeting for today. And we wish you many happy returns, Patrick.
Gotten applause for drawing the short straw, but thank you very much. I do want to, before we go forward though, I want to thank Jeff for all of the hard work. I saw it up close, particularly when we went back to Washington, D.C., and we all see it at the meetings as far as doing homework, and we had the pleasure of working together very closely on the assessment district, which you were instrumental, and so I appreciate your leadership. Thank you very much.
And back at you. We worked on that as a team, and it was a great thing for SAFCA.
Okay, at this time, we will go with the nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Jeff Harris. It was a great team in 2006, and I'd like to keep that going.
A second. Are there any? I'd like to understand if there's any other interest in serving as vice chair from others. I'd like to nominate Nick Avdis.
I'll second that.
At this point, we go with the, are there any more nominations? Let me ask at this time, since half the board has spoken in already. So we go with the first or the last?
Pardon me? What?
First nominated or the last nominated?
You pick the order. You're the chair.
It's the first
I'll let you make the
First
decision.
nomination.
Mr. Chair, before we take the vote, I'd like to understand if there's been a recent history where we've had an immediate rotation of chair to vice chair. How unusual is that? Is there anything you can lend to the conversation?
Very common.
What's that?
It's happened frequently
Is it? Okay.
throughout Safeco's history.
When's the last time it happened?
It was me.
Was it you? Okay.
I actually do have that record, if you'd like to look at it.
Usually in our packets, we get a sheet that lists everyone who's been chair for the previous 10 years or
It was
so.
in the board packet, wasn't it? I believe it was.
Would be helpful in the future, whoever's
I'll
in
make a
charge of
note
that.
of that, thank you.
Okay, so out of fairness, to be honest, I'm not comfortable with they just, let the chair flip a coin. I'm sure that somebody here knows the Roberts Rules of Order, whether or not we do first or second. Yes, please. Ashby.
Not that I have all these answers, but just one quick comment. Mr. Avdis would be an able vice chair. However, the reason that I served 3 years in a row, chair, vice chair, chair again, was because there was an ongoing issue in the district that I represent, Natomas, and I was ever so grateful when the appointments came around and Supervisor Cerna and I got a little help in Natomas by way of Jeff Harris, and he really worked hard last year, really hard, to make sure that an assessment passed. He held all the community meetings, he did all the work, and it's not a statement against anyone else, but he devoted an exceptional amount of time to Safeca, and I think in terms of for the city, and he has been seconded by our other colleague on the board, Mr. Jennings, who has a lot at risk too in terms of flood control in this region. So we would be well served with either one of them. But I think that Jeff has put in an awful lot of time here. Secondly, my understanding of the rules would be that if there was an official motion made, then there was a substitute motion made, then the substitute motion would go before the original motion. And I assume that that is what just happened. And if the substitute motion failed, then you would take up the original motion.
That is accurate. Thank you very much, Director Ashby.
Did you want to make that a substitute motion then?
Well, I issued
I think
mine in
that,
the spirit
I
of
assume
being
that was a substitute
yeah.
motion, yeah.
And then, again, before we take the vote, I tried using the request to speak button, by the way, so forgive me. I agree completely with what Director Ashby just said about Jeff and his capacity to serve this and lead this board very well. So my substitute motion is issued not in the spirit of not wanting Jeff to continue serving in a leadership capacity here for this board. It is more because I think it's healthy, generally, when we have a board like this with the composition the way we have it, to actually have a rotation that actually involves each of the capacities of our directors. And so having one of our other members, either from American River Flood Control, or in this case with the substitute motion RD 1000, I think that's healthy for this board. And so again, my substitute motion is not issued punitively against Mr. Harris at all, but I do think it is very healthy that we consider others that serve in different capacities besides just at the county and in municipal service.
Thank you, Director Harris.
So, in the natural ascension that usually happens on boards and commissions, the vice chair often ascends to the chair position and somebody backfills the vice chair. As you all know, it got out of order with me, and this has happened in the past as well, that somebody became the chair before being the vice chair. My interest in continuing in the leadership role is because the American River bisects my district, and most of the projects that are coming online in the next couple of years are in my district. And of course, I have a deep interest in flood control generally. So that's really what it's about. As far as next year goes, anything can happen. Anybody could become chair, anybody could become vice chair. So we are, in fact, rotating agencies, so it's going from the city to the county for the chair, and certainly it could do that again next year. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Director Shaw.
I also would like to echo the comments of Director Cerna, and I think that it is healthy with so many different categories of stakeholders on this board for us to have the participation and leadership of those that are elected by many different constituencies. And I agree wholeheartedly that the efforts of Chair Harris are greatly appreciated and have been greatly productive. I also feel that for those of us who serve on this board for several years, that there's only one opportunity to participate at the highest level, not only here in Sacramento, but also with our partners and colleagues in Washington, D.C. as well, and that is serving in a leadership role, which is why I very heartily second the nomination of Mr. Avdis. And Director Ashby's comments are very well received, specifically as it relates to Natomas. I've known Director Avdis for a while, and I know that he has a family business that's in the Natomas Basin. I also know that his children go to school in East Sacramento, in my neighborhood, in that floodplain, and he has family that lives there as well. And so I think that Director Avdis's professional abilities and civic capabilities will be equally matched by his personal desire to see that the entire region that is served by SAFCA is served with a sense of urgency and a sense of fairness. So I heartily endorse second the nomination of Director Avdis to be our chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Highly appropriate. So, and already have, if you want to.
Well, yes. So, generally, like I said, in the natural progression of things, somebody would serve as vice chair and then move up to chair, so have 2 years in leadership position. As I mentioned before, it got kind of out of order, and so I was chair first. And so I'd like to have that second year because I'm very highly invested, not only in the projects, but also in doing advocacy in D.C. So I know a lot of the players there. Patrick and I work very well together. We worked very well together as a lobbying team in D.C. So I'd like to have a second shot at that. And as I said, I've done a lot of homework on this. I'm well familiar with all the projects that are ongoing, and they completely affect my district as well. So that's my interest in being vice chair.
Director Advis?
Thank you, Director Harris. I appreciate your perspective, and I do appreciate the steady hand of leadership you've provided over the course of the past year. From my perspective, I've lived my entire life under the threat of a flood. I grew up in Rio Linda before SAFCA was formed. In fact, when SAFCA was formed, my family's ranch was actually taken by eminent domain in the early 90s by SAFCA. And that was actually part of the reason I went to law school in the first place, because frankly, I felt at that time that our family was unjustly treated. I went to law school, and I've been in land use practice for well over a decade and a half now. And I feel that, with an extensive record of public service, including my current service on the special district as RD 1000, which obviously provides flood protection, levee maintenance, and drainage services out in the entire Natomas Basin, over 55,000 acres. So for me, it's nothing against Jeff, and I think he'd make a fine chair again. I think from my perspective, this board is comprised of several representatives from the city, the county, and the special districts that are equal members here. And I just think that given that, the special district should receive consideration for a leadership post on this. And, that's why I'm accepting the nomination and hope for your support. So.
Thank you, Director Avdis. Now, on the speaker queue, it says member D2. So has anybody else chimed in to speak? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay, then we will call the question on the alternative motion, and we will actually let's do a roll call vote on this.
Director Ashby?
Just to be clear.
Substitute motion, yes.
Which is Nick Avdis for vice chair.
Correct.
No.
Director Avdis?
Yes.
Director Barandis?
Yes.
Director Conant?
Yes.
Director Frost?
Yes.
Director Harris?
No.
Director Holloway?
No.
Director Jennings?
No.
Director Kennedy?
Aye.
Director Peters? Director Cerna?
Yes.
Director Shaw?
Aye.
Director Natoli? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much, and in the spirit of democracy, thank you for starting us off on a really auspicious beginning for my chairmanship.
Yeah, good luck.
With that, we will go to item number 2.
Before we move to item 2, Safeco staff would like to recommend that we drop item 15 from the receive and file portion, and I would take a motion on that.
Moved by Director Jennings, second by Director Holloway. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Chairman Kennedy, members of the board, Rick Johnson, Executive Director. Want to take a moment to thank Director Harris for all of his hard work last year and look forward to working with you. Chairman Kennedy, now I've got myself mixed up there on this transition, but thank you very much. I did want to just take a few moments to touch on a few items on the Executive Director's report. So last month, we had an important vote in Congress where the Water Infrastructure Improvement for the Nation Act was passed, and included in that was the Water Resources Development Act. And the President signed it into law on the 16th of December, so it was the day after our last board meeting. It authorized the American River Common Features Project for just under $1.6 billion. So it's now all of our projects that we have ongoing are all now authorized, and it was also our largest authorization to date. And in addition, it did include some language that Safeco requested to help us deal with some of our excess credits at Natomas and utilize them on our other projects. So that was important that got not only passed but signed into law, and I just wanted to make you aware of that. I wanted to take a few moments just to talk a little bit about the storm that we had last week. This is a picture of Folsom when it was making the releases coming out of there. I believe at this point it was releasing 60,000, which was the maximum it released. I thought you might find this a little interesting. This is actually for northern Sierras. It's the precipitation index. That green line that you see up there is the wettest year that we've had, and the kind of purple blue line on the left there is to date this year. So as you can see, we've had a very wet year so far. That solid blue area there is average, and then some of the other lines are some of the recent years we've had when we've been a little bit drier. So we are having a very wet year to date. To date, we haven't had any storms that have really been a problem for the system that we're working on, but we do have a large snowpack now, and we are in a system where there's a number of atmospheric rivers that have been formed. So we got to get through the next 2 or 3 months with the concern of having a warm storm come, a warm rain on the snowmelt. That's what causes our problems on the American River. So just as a reminder, this is a picture of the Sacramento River system that protects us. We're down towards the bottom end there. All the red lines are levees. It's a system of dams, levees, bypasses, and weirs that protect us. And all those blue lines are all the creeks and rivers that drain north of us into the Sacramento River, and all that water has to get past Sacramento out to the under the Golden Gate. So just zooming in on our area here, the red lines are our facilities that Safeco has a responsibility for. But what I wanted to point out here, what we saw last week was the Sacramento River draining a lot of Northern California, and it reached a point where our big flood relief on the Sacramento River is the Yolo bypass. So both the Fremont weirs up towards the north and the Sacramento weir and bypass down just across from us downtown here, both functioned and operated. The system worked very well, and it helped demonstrate why we need to improve working with the state to widen the Yolo bypass, and then also in our authorization widen the Sacramento weir and bypass to give us further capability to address those. We did have, there was flooding south of where our facilities end, down in the McElmy and the Cosumnes rivers. And I think what we learned from some of those are some of the issues with those levees showed why the new standards by the state and federal government are getting us to address some of the encroachments and pipes and stuff that are through those. And so I think what we learned from that is we need to be continue to be diligent. Now, jumping over to the American River, this is what the inflow looked like going into Folsom Dam. It was kind of two waves there. We are on our last year of our agreement between Safeco and the Bureau of Reclamation to reoperate Folsom for additional storage. It worked well, and it helped the system. I do want to use this to point out where we'll get some advantage next year when the Joint Federal Project comes online. I'm going to kind of jump to the next slide, which takes this graph partway through. On the bottom there, or we're in between the two peaks. And what that blue line on the bottom shows is the outflow coming out of Folsom. And what the top line shows is the storage in Folsom. And for flood control, we should have been under that, where it says 400,000 on the bottom of that top graph. So we were encroached quite a bit into the flood control space. And the reason for that is the graph on the left shows what the existing main dam is. Those outlets down on the bottom there are the outlets where we can get the flood outlet releases from now. They can only release about 30,000 cubic feet per second. So we were kind of caught where we couldn't get any more water out last week until we got to the very top. The one on the right shows how the Joint Federal Project is much lower in there. So what happened is they couldn't physically get any more water out to get us out of encroachment. So we entered the storms coming into this week, and we're still about over 130,000 encroached in flood control. Next year, we won't have that issue with the new gates. The other thing that the new gates will help is we won't have to hold the flood space down as low come springtime. We can refill better. So this storm kind of helped show the advantages of a lot of the projects that we're taking on right now, and I just wanted to kind of explain that. Jumping over to another subject, as I looked back on last year, I wanted to point out it actually turned out to be one of our most significant years ever when you look at a lot of the activities that were accomplished. As was mentioned earlier, we were able to form the new consolidated capital assessment district that replaced the old one, and it gives us funding for all the authorized projects now moving forward. Based upon that new district, we were able to take advantage of the low interest rates and sold over $312 million worth of bonds, and we paid off all of our outstanding bonds, resulting in just under $110 million in new cash for the projects over the next few years. We were able to come to an agreement with United Auburn Indian Community on how we would work together and treat and deal with some of the sensitive cultural areas in a very appropriate manner. Jumping over to the projects, the South Sacramento Streams Group, which was authorized in '99, we completed the last two major construction projects last year. The picture on the left is Safeco's Florin Creek Detention Basin, which works in conjunction with the Corps project, which was fixing up Florin Creek to better handle flows. There was some damage to the Corps project from some of the storms, and so there's some work that needs to be done still on a little cleanup, but we'll be holding a ceremony later in 2017 for that, and this will allow a number of citizens down in the South County area to be removed from the FEMA floodplain there. So that was a great accomplishment. On the American River, these projects were authorized in 96 and 99. The last phase was completed last year, approximately 25 miles on both sides of the river, addressing the seepage and levee stability, bringing them up to the current standards. Still just some closeout work, but that one was also completed last year. Folsom Dam, just talked about a little bit. We basically have completed all the construction out there. There's some warranty work and a few items that the contractor and the Corps are working on. If we needed to, we could operate in an emergency, but they still have some items to handle over the next couple of months. But that's the largest dam project in the country, and so it's been the backbone of our system on the American River. Natomas, this was extremely critical what happened last year here. I mentioned up front a new construction start, so why that was so important is since 2010, Congress had really cut down on allowing any new Corps of Engineers projects to go to construction. They were wanting to finish up all the existing ones before they started any new ones. And between 2010 and 2016, there was only a few that got new construction starts, and only one of those was flood control. So to be able to secure a new construction start for Natomas to allow the Corps of Engineers to pick up where we left off was great. We were able to work closely with the state and Corps to get the project participation agreement executed faster than normal, so that the Corps now is out for bids on the first contract. They expect to award it next month. They've awarded the contract already that will allow the clearing of the construction footprint moving forward there. Just mentioned a little earlier that the American River Common Features General Reevaluation Report was authorized. That includes widening the Sacramento Weir down there and a number of other areas that the other projects hadn't addressed as far as levee work goes. And so that was extremely important authorization. When you look at it, was the biggest flood authorization in the WARDA, on top of our Natomas one, the previous WARDA, so we've been very blessed there. With that, SAFCA is moving forward with early implementation. It'll take us a while before the Corps will have a new construction start to do the work on the levees out there, so we're moving forward with a levee accreditation program. The board a few months ago approved us moving forward with advertising, and so we're proceeding with the north area right now. We do have pre-construction activities that will clear the construction area, and we will be starting later this spring on that work, with the work on the Sacramento River to follow the next couple of years. In order to do that, we needed help from the state on funding, so last year we were also able to execute an agreement under the State Urban Flood Risk Reduction Program, state providing $112 million of the estimated $160 million cost, so that was a significant agreement last year. So just kind of to wrap this all up, this is probably the most important part. In the 90s, the Corps looked at a number of comprehensive plans for Sacramento. For a number of reasons, we were never able to get any of them authorized. Over the years, we've been picking these components, these various projects off as we could. One of the alternatives that was looked at in the 96 report and provided to Congress was called a stepped release plan. So the reason this is important is with the authorization of the GRR, every component of the map here of all of our facilities is addressed by one of our 6 authorized projects. So we finally have all the components of a comprehensive plan authorized by Congress. So that was a very significant accomplishment last year. So just kind of wanted to highlight those as we move forward, and I'll see if there's any questions.
Mr. Johnson, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have the consent calendar.
And items 3 through 10 are in order.
Is there a motion? Moved by Director Ashby, seconded by Director Shaw. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Our next item is separate matters, item 11, resolution number 2017011, authorizing the executive director to amend contract number 1314 with Parsons Brinkerhoff, Inc. for construction management and associated services for improvements associated with the levy accreditation program.
Good afternoon, Pete Kelpie, Director of Engineering. This is a contract amendment that we have with PB. We went through an interview process as part of our levy accreditation program to select engineering firms, construction management firms, to manage the work that we plan on doing and strengthening the levees along the Arcade Creek and Nemdeck area, along with the Sacramento River system. When we entered into the first agreement with Parsons Brinkerhoff, it was just the initial contract to allow them to review plans and specs and to provide comments and insight on how construction projects can be done, so plans and specs can be designed that it takes into account how a contractor considers the work. Now that we're ready to go to construction, we do have the plans out to bid. We are going to delay the bid opening until early March, but this contract allows Parsons Brinkerhoff to manage the construction contract going forward, including materials testing, surveying, and associated services with managing a $25 to $30 million contract. So with that, I'll take any questions the board might have.
Questions? Director Shaw.
And actually more of a general question, not necessarily specific to this contract, but since we implemented that new policy, I want to say it was either last year or the end of 2015, where there's more, not every amendment has to come before the board. We've streamlined things, but we have caps on it. Can you recall what those numbers are and what triggers action by the board versus what the executive director is able to authorize under an existing contract?
I want to say it's around $1 million was the... Okay.
I think the limits are in your binders on items 16 through 21. There's the quarterly reports. I think the limits are on there.
This is a significant one. That's why we wanted the board to be aware.
And because there's an amendment amount, and I think there was a cumulative amount that triggers it. So I don't need the answer right now, but if someone could get that to me, I would appreciate it.
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the item.
Second.
Moved by Director Shaw, seconded by Director Harris. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Item number 12, resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute agreements related to the Lower American River Bank Protection Working Group. Resolution 012, amending Safeca's professional services agreement with Northwest Hydraulic Consultants for technical assistance with erosion and bank protection related issues. And Resolution 013, a cost-sharing agreement with the City of Sacramento on behalf of the Sacramento Water Forum for modeling design services.
Chairman Kennedy, members of the board, Tim Washburn, Director of Planning. So these two contracts will carry us through 2017 in our work with the Bank Protection Working Group of the Lower American River Task Force. And just to remind the board, this was a group that we created in reaction to the recommendations in the American River Common Features General Reevaluation Report, where the Corps, as you know, has recommended a substantial amount of armoring along the Lower American River levee system. And we want to be certain that what is actually needed along that system is well considered and is well vetted with stakeholders along the Lower American River Task Force. And so the Bank Protection Working Group is the forum for looking at these issues and being certain that we have a good handle on what's required as we increase the capacity of that channel to handle sustained high flows in the channel, all the way up to 160,000 cubic feet per second, potentially for a sustained period. So it's a lot higher flow than we've had down the river since Folsom was built. And it has potential to exert a lot of stress on the levee system. So in 2016, we went through and did a screening analysis using tools developed by the Department of Water Resources as part of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. We did a geomorphologic report analyzing the trends in the river with respect to flows, sediment, erosion, and essentially broke the river up into a series of reaches and sections so that we can understand the dynamics of the channel and the effect of treatment in one place or another, and summarized for the group the voluminous amount of data that the Corps gathered together in the course of the GRR study. In 2017, we're now going to focus on where those reports suggest, not too surprisingly, is the area of greatest concern. It's where the levee system is narrowest, upstream of Paradise Beach, all the way up just short of Watt Avenue, where the levee system is narrow and velocities are very high. And so in 2017, the contract with NHC allows that group to lead us forward in looking very specifically in that reach and doing a specific fine-grained analysis of what the erosion potential is so we can determine, do we have any immediate areas of concern that need remediation, with the eye to, with the authorization that's occurred with the WIN 2016, it's possible we could start to see some Corps money show up and get us going on bank protection on the American River, and this work will help us get ready for that. So we're asking the board to approve another year of consulting work by NHC at about the same level as last year, and they are our principal kind of engineering guiding agency in the working group. The second contract is a cost share agreement with Waterform, and here where we were sort of proceeding ahead, realizing that we need to do a two-dimensional model in order to get a good handle on not only velocities at specific locations, but how treatments in one place might affect another. And it turned out the Waterform was also developing a two-dimensional model to guide them in their development of a habitat enhancement program for fish in the river. We're kind of at opposite ends. They're looking at more of the low flow, we're looking at more of the high flow. But our staff, Dan Tibbetts in particular, convened meetings with modelers to look at the logic of developing a single model for these multi-objective purposes in the channel. And I think our technical folks agreed that developing a base model would be a good investment for us, both on the habitat side and the flood side in managing the river, and it'll also have some benefits, we think, to county parks as they move forward with a resource management plan for the parkway. So this is going to be a really important management tool for the parkway that we're proposing to do collaboratively with the Waterform. CBEC is the consultant that the Waterform's been working with, and they will be doing the modeling. They have a scope of around $280,000 to do this work. We're suggesting that we could go up to 165 of that, depending on how we allocate the benefits of the modeling work. They're more interested, as I say, on the low flows in the upper part of the river that's unlevied. We're interested in the high flows in the lower part of the river that is levied. We're going to have to sort out how much of the 280 should be allocated to us and how much should be allocated to the Waterform. So what we're setting here is just a ceiling. It's not necessarily what the final amount of that contract would be. So those are the two actions before the board to renew our engagement with NHC for another year, and then to cooperate with the Waterform in producing this hydrodynamic 2D model for virtually the entire American River Channel from Nimbus to the mouth.
Ms. Washburn, Director Natoli.
Jim, a question I have is that the amount seems to be just, basically a duplication of what we paid last year for the work that was done, as you've described it, certainly in the written report as well. Now we're going to do the modeling for $160,000. You just summarized with saying it's the ceiling currently, may not be the final contract amount. So are they on a retainer on a per monthly, or is it is it based on it? So how did it work out that it was 160 and now it's just another 160?
I mean, that's sort of happenstance. I mean,
okay.
We're It's not that easy to anticipate.
okay, but I'm trying to get some sense about it.
Basically, the
because-
idea was, look, we did pretty well last year, let's continue at about that level of service. It's not a retainer, but, we feel like the level of effort they put in last year is approximately what we're looking for this year, and it just came out there.
Okay, but it's a different work product, so.
No, the model is the second contract. So the model is being done by CBEC, not NHC.
Okay, they're doing that, okay. So
Okay, and their estimate is 280.
on top of the 360?
On top of the 160 for
160.
NHC, and of that 280, we're saying our ceiling would be 165, subject to negotiating with the water
forum.
Right. So the two are separate tasks. They need to be coordinated, and NHC needs to be working through the modeling to make sure that, the model product is serving their needs as well.
This is a $440,000 ceiling?
325. So 160 plus 165. And then up maximum. So of the 280 on modeling, the water forum is going to pay at least 115.
Okay, but the 280 is not, it's 280 plus the
280,
160.
the water forum will contract for 280. They have a commitment from Safeco to reimburse up to 165.
So our commitment is the 320, but they're putting in 115, so.
At least 115, subject to, where we come out.
That's 435,000 total contract, not necessarily us paying all of it. That's what I'm trying to
For
get to.
both, yeah, for both
That's
water
what I'm
forum
trying
and
to get to.
Safeco. Okay, from
that's
that
what I'm
point
trying
of
to
view, yes.
get to.
440.
Okay, and with the NHC work, then is it anticipated that there's going to be additional work beyond this? I mean, obviously, you talk about then getting teed up to construction potentially in 2019.
Right.
So any idea what that scope of work would encompass in a year hence?
One of the things we're trying to do is get the Corps under the new authorization to put up another $1 million to complete their, soils analysis of the soils composition of, the berms and banks along the river, so we have a good idea of, what's the erodibility of those soils. And, talking to Dan, who worked on the GRR, I mean, he's thinking that's probably about $1 million of modeling work by the Corps. And we're hoping to get that as part of pre-construction engineering and design now that the project's authorized. Plus, they're going to have to put up some money to participate.
So that would be the 2018 work, so what we would do then.
Well, that would be 2017 if we can. We're trying to get ready in 2018 to then go into design, because hopefully we will have got ourselves to a point where we've identified where we think our most immediate needs are, and now we can go into a design with the expectation maybe of construction in 2019.
But if the Corps doesn't come up, then we're still $1 million short to do what you just described as far as the soil.
I think we are anticipating that the design work and the construction work will be done through the Corps. We're not in a position to carry the design and construction.
Right.
We're kind of trying to tee this up and accelerate its happening.
All right, thanks.
Your questions? Okay, if there's no interest in bifurcating the two, I'll take a motion for both resolutions. Moved by Director Konitz, second by Vice Chair Avdis. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Item number 13, resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute agreements related to the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project. Resolution 014, funding agreement with the Department of Water Resources for Bright Landfill remediation. And Resolution 015, a cost-sharing agreement with Yolo County for cooperation in developing a program for mitigating agricultural impacts in the Yolo bypass.
Chairman Kennedy, Tim Washburn, continuing.
Good to see you again, Tim.
So, as Rick indicated, this has to do with improvements to the Sacramento bypass, which is, right here, just at the mouth, near the mouth of the American River. And to refresh, I mean, the whole idea of the Sacramento bypass is to take the flow off the American River and shunt that amount into the Yola bypass so that the flow in the Sacramento River in these very extreme floods remains about the same upstream and downstream of the American River. That's its historic design function. And as we move to increase the potential to send a higher flow down the American River, up to 160,000 cubic feet per second. In order to avoid that flow turning and going down toward the pocket area of West Sacramento, the adjustment is to widen the Sacramento weir and bypass so that flow goes out into the Yola bypass, and we maintain this sort of design objective of keeping the flows in the Sacramento River roughly the same upstream and downstream. That's part of what was authorized in the Water Infrastructure and Investment Act of 2016, the American River Common Features GRR. The state has money remaining in their 1E funding for system improvements, and they have made the early start on widening the Sacramento bypass a focus of using that funding to get that going and done in advance of the federal government. And they've included in that project also widening the Yola bypass to the east between the Sacramento bypass and Interstate 5. And so the project that the Corps is looking at is this. And it involves moving the north levee of the Sacramento bypass to the north about 1,500 feet, which is roughly doubling the current size of the bypass, and then moving the east levee of the Yola bypass about an equal distance to the east. It narrows and then comes back in up at I-5. This will help manage the hydraulic effects of putting more water through the bypass and into the Yola bypass, and it also anticipates the subsequent widening of the Fremont Weir in the upper part of the Elkhorn Basin, which lies down the road, funding permitting. So this is an extremely important project to be funded, potentially 100% by the state through their remaining 1E funds. One of the issues in order to make this possible is that there is a 11-acre, not showing, an 11-acre landfill, an old landfill from Yolo County, the Bright landfill, that sits inside the current alignment of the levee at the westerly end of the Sac bypass. There's on the order of 100,000 cubic yards of waste material in that landfill that has to be moved out of the way so that it doesn't end up in the widened bypass when the levee is set back. This is an issue that has been difficult for the state to deal with, and they have welcomed SAFCA's willingness to step up, work with them in devising a plan to deal with the landfill and undertake the relocation of the landfill with our funds, subject to being reimbursed by the state for the costs. Now, the state likes it because they don't have any responsibility for the hazardous materials that are in the landfill. Those will be SAFCA's responsibility. We like it because it's expediting this project, and we think the liabilities are readily manageable. We have contracted with our consulting firm, Geosyntec. Joe Nyland is here from Geosyntec to come up with a concept of how we might do it. We've looked at really two different alternatives. One is just pick up the material and move it to a Class 1 or in some cases Class 2 facility. It's very expensive to move that material. I think the estimate is on the order of $15 million to just pick it up, clean it up, and get rid of it. The second alternative is to move the material into what's called a corrective action management unit, which is basically a new landfill, but properly designed so that it doesn't leak, it doesn't leach, and it's contained and safe. And so that's our preferred concept. And the location would be at about the corner of the two newly relocated levees. And as I will show you, the concept is to take existing material from the landfill. And as I say, when you take the existing material plus allow for some excavation of the confining layer below it, we're talking about moving on the order of 100,000 cubic yards of material. There's also a cover on the landfill of around 58,000 100,000 cubic yards that would be taken off, stockpiled, and then used to reclaim some of it, perhaps going into the Camus. So you take the 100,000 acres of material, screen them, separate out there are some materials that are proposed to actually be moved to the Yolo landfill right nearby, around 19,000 yards of material, and then take the rest, almost 90,000 yards, and create what's called this corrective action management unit. So it has the landfill, and then it has cover, an asphalt cap, and asphalt on the side with a solid clay layer below, and then a cement drainage canal around it, and it becomes a permanent and manageable, safe fate for this landfill. And in its location, it would also serve, it's going to be about 3 acres. It will also serve as a corp yard for the reclamation districts in the Elkhorn Basin, who are working with us on this plan and are our partners in effect. And they are also working to consolidate themselves into a single reclamation district for purposes of governance and partnership with Safeca and efficiency in this project, which is a huge development. So we would have a partnership with the Consolidated Reclamation District. They would have a corporation yard for operation and maintenance of the levee, and they're thinking also potentially of putting a fire station up here. They're in a FEMA flood zone, and they can't build it at ground elevation. So this is a very attractive concept to them and has been a big motivation in their willingness to cooperate and support a setback of levees in their district, an unusual circumstance for most reclamation districts in the valley. So the item for you today is simply giving us authority, the executive director, to enter into this cost-sharing agreement with the state, wherein we pledge to go forward with the relocation of the landfill, and the state agrees to reimburse us for our costs incurred in doing so. Right now, our estimate is it's about $8.7 million with a 25% contingency built into that to undertake this work. It would be carried out. We have to do a risk investigation and feasibility study with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and assuming we reach agreement with them on the concept that we're proposing, we would then develop a remedial action plan and an environmental document leading up to design and actual removal of the landfill. If things go well, we're hoping that we might be able to get through the planning, permitting process in 2017, finish design, and possibly be in construction in 2018. But we need this cost share agreement to move forward, because without the cost share agreement, the cost share agreement is the trigger for us to begin recovering costs for our investment in this effort. So up to date, the costs that we've advanced for our consultants, we're absorbing as soon as we get the cost share agreement in place. Then our expenses become reimbursable 100% by the state. So that's the agreement we're asking the board to allow us to enter into. The second agreement is also a cost share agreement with Yolo County. So the flip side of this coin is Yolo County is participating with us. Their concern is with the setback of the levees. The levees take, up about 300 acres-ish of footprint, and currently farmed ag land goes into the bypass. Yolo wants to be certain that there is compensation for any impacts to their agricultural production in the county. Now, exactly what that means, we're going to work with them to determine, but it's more than just, oh, you have a conservation easement on some other ag land somewhere else. Now they're saying, look, this has the potential to impact our agriculturally dependent economy, and we don't want to have that burden placed upon us. So the second agreement here is for us to cost share with Yolo County in updating their model for measuring impacts to ag productivity and to the economy of the county, and to identify appropriate compensation measures when such impacts are developed. And that's an essential part of this whole cooperative arrangement, is the county's willingness to go forward with this program, which they recognize to be of primary benefit to Sacramento and also to West Sacramento, but primarily to Sacramento on our side, with the potential to impose some economic burdens on them. And this is their and our way working with them to ensure that they aren't forced to absorb burdens on our behalf. So the second contract allows us to work with them to sort of flesh out what measures might be necessary to avoid those impacts to the county.
Thank you. Questions?
Adam?
Yes, so the dump itself, how old is this dump?
Oh.
When was it, are we talking 50s, 60s?
Yeah, I think it's 50s. 30s?
30s?
30s. It's
So-
been closed for quite some time. It's not active.
So what's the estimates, did they core it to figure out how many cubic yards we gotta move and?
Yeah, that's
the
what we've been
estimate's pretty
doing. That's
realistic?
what we've been doing with our consultant team. We've been out there doing borings, doing investigations, site-specific, to sort of determine, what this looks like. So they've been out figuring out, what do we got here? What's in it? What's below it? How much of this would we have to pick up and move in order to clean this up?
Okay.
Director Natoli.
Yes, thank you, Chair Kennedy. Just a quick comment. I just wanted to certainly support the effort here, but also I think, as Tim addressed, part of the collective effort, certainly in this case, Yolo County being the parties, impacts on ag be one, thoroughly investigated, but secondly, then some mitigation be considered. Very important, I think, as all the Delta counties, certainly in our discussions about state efforts as well as other efforts to do water projects, whether they be water supply, infrastructure, restoration of environmentally sensitive areas and so forth, or establishment of those areas, that the agricultural component is very important. And I think certainly the benefit to the folks that we represent here on SAFCA and the improvements both upstream and downstream to, I think improved flood protection are very critical. And I think the cooperation, and I want to commend you, Tim, certainly for your work. I know there's been a whole task force of folks and some members of this board as well that have been part of party to those discussions. But I think this is an important component. I think it addresses some of the long-term concerns that you're not going to have damage to both, farmers and agricultural production, but that's taken into consideration that if there are impacts at given times in any season and or throughout the course of a period of time, that this one has been looked at, but there's consideration in the overall flood protection plan. So I think it makes good sense, and I just want to indicate my support for the work that's going on here. I think it sets a good precedent for how all government entities ought to approach projects when they look to do certain improvements. Thanks.
I think I should point out, this funding, by the way, for SAFCA is coming from our development impact fee. So when we updated the fee in October, we made clear this is a primary investment opportunity for the development impact fee, and it's well suited because, again, we're not doing the heavy lifting here. We're helping to make things happen with relatively modest investment on our part, but important investment in terms of creating the kind of agreement that's necessary for this sort of project to go forward. So I wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and Tim, I just wanted to also express my continued appreciation for your efforts and our staff's efforts. I mean, this is a big deal. It's a big deal for us. It's a big deal for our partners in Yolo County and regional flood control. So I want to echo Member Natoli's comments. I think this is fantastic, and I look forward to more things to come in the bypass. So
Let me just make a note also. The consolidation of the reclamation districts includes Reclamation District 1600, which is north of I-5. And they are becoming part of the consolidated district with the clear recognition that the next project, funds permitting, is Fremont-Weir. So Fremont-Weir widening is becoming a politically policy-supported project locally with the county, be great benefit to Sutter County, It's a tremendous benefit to all of the surrounding lands. And it's now gone from an idea we've been somewhat in the wilderness with for many years to an idea that is now becoming the established public policy for the region. So this is unprecedented progress, I would say.
Thank you. Any more questions? We have a motion for both resolutions from Director Harris. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Abdus. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Everything.
The remaining items are receive and file.
Then with that, we will adjourn with our next meeting being on February 16th at 3 o'clock, and make note that it will be in the Board of Supervisors Chambers, 700 H Street. We are adjourned.
Okay.